Hey everybody, it's Chris, and over the past couple weeks I've been looking at the monk subclasses in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and I've been giving ratings to each of their features, and now what I want to do is do some ranking, and what I want to do is include all the monk subclasses that came before, as long as they aren't reprinted. So all the ones that are still considered official subclasses, I'm going to rank them all against each other, and instead of just doing it as one big thing, what I want to do, just like I did with sorcerers a few weeks ago, is I want to look at various levels of play and rank them against each other at each of those levels. And the levels of play I have chosen for the sorcerer and for the monk, and probably for any classes I do after this, will be the levels that the subclasses get new features. For the monk, that is levels 3, 6, 11, and 17. Now, if you watch my sorcerer video, you know how the rankings work already, but I'm going to cover it again quickly. Each feature is going to get a rating from 1 to 5 stars, and when we get to 6th level, what I do is I will add the level 3 rating to the level 6 rating so that we get a total, and we will rank them by their totals. And then I'm going to be putting all 4 ratings together at level 17. That way we're including everything that a monk has up to that level. Then I put the subclasses in the order of their total score. If two subclasses tie, I'm just going to put them in the order they're presented, unless they weren't tied at the previous level we looked at. In that case, the one that used to be ahead wins the tie, because I figure it is a stronger choice if it is better at earlier levels and just as good at later levels. In my sorcerer ranking video, I was asked a number of times in the comments to remind viewers what the features from the older subclasses did when I gave them a rating. And I decided I would do this. And that was time consuming and is going to make this for a longer video. I was originally planning to cover multi-classing options for the monk in this video. I will be doing a separate video for that. So that'll be my next video, hopefully a shorter video. And since I knew how the ratings would work when I started my 2024 monk subclasses, they all already have a star rating. So that's going to make things a little faster, because as I go over those, I'll just remind you what those ratings were as I put them in the rankings. And if you are wondering why one of the 2024 monk subclasses got a certain rating for a certain feature, I have explained it in detail in those videos. So I will link all 4 of those videos in the video description. So if you see, the level 11 feature for Mercy Monk and you're wondering why I gave it the rating I did, you can go to that video and I will give you a detailed explanation in that video. Okay, are we good? Let's go. So level 3, and we are going to start with the Warrior of Mercy, which has Hand of Harm, Hand of Healing, and Implements of Mercy. And I gave it 3 stars. That's enough for 2nd place at level 3. That said, there are going to be a fair amount of ties with a 3-star rating at level 3. Then we have Warrior of Shadow. Shadow Arts provides a darkness spell that you can see through, dark vision, and the minor illusion cantrips. And I gave it 3 stars. It's going to place it in 3rd place at level 3. And then Warrior of Elements. And level 3 is great for Warrior of Elements with Elemental Attunement and Manipulate Elements. And I gave it 5 stars. And unsurprisingly, it's going to find itself in 1st place at level 3. Then Warrior of the Open Hand, we have Open Hand Technique, and that's all they get, but it's a decent feature at level 3, and I gave it 3 stars, which places them in 4th position. All right, now let's get into more detail for the older subclasses. So we have Way of the Ascended Dragon, and they're going to get a few different things. So Draconic Disciple allows you to re-roll a failed Charisma Intimidation or a Charisma Persuasion check. I'm not sure why they didn't just give you advantage on those checks, but either way, your monk likely has a crappy Charisma score, and neither of these skills are even class skills. And if you find the case where your monk is acting as the party face, something has gone terribly wrong. This is maybe not entirely worthless, but it's close. And then we have the second part of the feature that allows us to do acid, fire, cold, lightning, or poison damage with our unarmed strikes. And I kind of went over this in my Warrior of Elements video, how changing damage types is actually not that great for monks with unarmed strikes. and probably a bad idea at level 6. The thing is that if monsters in D&D regularly had vulnerabilities to damage, you could use a feature like this to exploit those vulnerabilities, and it could be very good. That's not the case. Almost no monsters are vulnerable to any damage types, never mind the ones that you can select. So all you're really doing is taking bludgeoning and changing it with another damage type that's probably not more reliable. And once we have force damage with our unarmed strikes, we're not really facing immunity or resistance at all, so then this really doesn't benefit you at all. And the only real difference for the damage types you can select here from Warrior of Elements is instead of getting thunder damage, you get poison damage. You know, that damage type just renowned for being so reliable. So this just doesn't really help us. It certainly is thematic, but I don't think it's a real benefit. And then we're going to know one language, which is Draconic, and that's a tiny thing. And finally, we get Breath of the Dragon, which allows for a feature that is actually quite similar to the Dragonborn breath weapon, and it's limited in uses similarly as well. And Dragon Breath for a Dragonborn is okay, but it represents about a third of what a Dragonborn gets, and species traits tend to be not necessarily as potent as class traits and subclass traits. So getting like 1/3 of a racial trait total is not that great, but it's far from useless. So the Draconic Disciple part is almost worthless, even with all 3 parts, but Breath of the Dragon is okay, and it's a bit on the weak side, but I think it's enough to give it 2 stars, basically almost on its own, and that's going to land them in 7th place at level 2. Then we go to Way of the Astral Self, and we get Arms of the Astral Self. And that actually got worse in the new rules by a fair amount. One of the only real mechanical incentives to take Astral Self Monk was you could use Wisdom in place of Strength for grapple checks, which used to be athletics checks, when you had the arms active. That doesn't work for grappling anymore, since it doesn't impact the DC of your grapples. And monks are using dexterity to grapple now anyways. This is a bonus action and a focus point, and all you're really getting is 5 extra feet of reach on your turns only, and you can use your wisdom instead of dexterity to make attacks. Again, for your unarmed strikes only. And that's not much of an advantage, because likely at level 3, your dexterity and wisdom are both +3. So it's not really a benefit. Now, if you want to focus on wisdom at later levels, it could eventually be a benefit for that kind of character. However, if you do focus on wisdom instead of dexterity, you'll actually be worse at grappling than other monks. This I am going to give 2 stars to, though I was tempted to give it 1 star, because maybe you want a wisdom-focused monk, and at least this kind of works for that. But one way or the other, at level 3, this ends up in 8th spot. Then we get Way of the Drunken Master, and we are going to get bonus proficiencies and Drunken Technique. So we get the Performance skill, I know, exactly the skill you wanted your monk to have, and Brewer Supplies proficiency. And when we use Flurry of Blows, we can disengage. And that does sound a little bit like 1/3 of the usefulness of an Open Hand Monk's Open Hand Technique. This is not worthless, but it's not great. And I'm going to give it 2 stars. That's a 9th place position for Drunken Master at level 3. Then we get Way of the Kensai, and they get Path of the Kensai. So Path of the Kensai allows you to choose some weapons that normally couldn't be monk weapons, and you can use them as monk weapons. And I can give you the whole list. So there's dart, light crossbow, short bow, sling, blowgun, hand crossbow, longbow, musket, pistol, battle axe, flail, longsword, morningstar, rapier, trident, warhammer, and whip. You pick 1 melee weapon from that list and 1 ranged weapon. And technically it does scale where you can pick more weapons as you level up, though I'm not sure how much of an advantage that is. So there are a lot of ranged weapons, and ranged weapons actually really benefit from using the martial arts die at higher levels. Not so much at level 3. Well, I mean, like the blowgun does, but you probably don't want to use a blowgun. The melee stuff might help you by 1 die type for a while, but only with your attack action. And it is a very small damage increase that doesn't last, and it's going to conflict with something else, which we're going to get into right now. Agile Parry. which gives you a +2 armor class after a turn where you use your attack action to attack with an unarmed strike. So bye-bye to that damage bonus we were just talking about, or even using weapons at level 3. +2 armor class is pretty good, but your damage does actually suffer here, because we're probably talking 2 die types lower for damage than, say, using a longsword as a versatile weapon, at least at level 3. That'll eventually even out. And Kensai Shot, this gives you a d4 bonus to damage for your turn when you use a bonus action on your ranged attacks. So it's like a worse version of Hunter's Mark. And you get it, tool proficiency with Calligrapher's Supplies or Painter's Supplies. This is mostly really small stuff. The armor class boost, though, is pretty good, despite the fact that this subclass is kind of presented as a weapon expert monk who won't be using their weapon at level 3 if they want to take advantage of that. And that's weird because all the other monks are using weapons, but it's still probably a 3-star feature, all combined. And so they're going to get 5th spot at level 3. Then we get Way of the Long Death and Touch of Death. That says when we reduce a creature within 5 feet of us to 0 hit points, we get temporary hit points equal to our Wisdom modifier plus our Monk level. That's somewhat similar to the Patron Warlock Fiend, which gives a similar feature. That one's actually a little bit better. It's a little more flexible on when you get the hit points, and the scaling is the same. It is not bad, though, and the scaling is pretty good at higher levels. I do think this is worthy of 3 stars. It is a perfectly decent feature, and that is enough for 6th spot for Way of the Long Death at level 3, though notice there are a lot of ties here, and we will be breaking most of those as we level up. So the old Way of 4 Elements monk was kind of infamous as being the terrible subclass for monks, but players in the know knew that Sun Soul monk was worse, so this is going to be a good example. Our 3rd level feature, Radiant Sunbolt, gives us basically ranged unarmed strike attacks with our attack action that do radiant damage, but they can't grapple or push like unarmed strikes normally can. They have a 30-foot range. There is a compatibility issue here as well with the new rules, because the text says the damage is a d4 and changes with level as shown in the martial arts table. So I would assume it's supposed to be a d6 now, but you would have to check with your DM, of course. And the d6 damage would be the same damage as a short bow, which you can use and has a longer range. Now you can make some bonus action attacks, but it eats up your focus points. And this feature cannot stunning strike. This is basically a feature that lets us save arrows from a short bow, I guess. If you want to use a short bow as a monk, which you probably don't unless you're forced to, and you would only really be forced to is if you're at ranged, and this does not have nearly the range of the short bow. So it's terrible. This is a 1-star feature. Sun Soul is last and definitely least with 10th spot at 3rd level. And that brings us to level 6. First we have Warrior Mercy, and they get Physician's Touch. This is an above average feature with the auto poison and the condition removal enhancements to our Hand of Healing and Harm level 3 features. And I gave it 4 stars, and it keeps 2nd place at level 6. Warrior of Shadow gets Shadow Step. This is a nice feature, and it doesn't eat up focus points. And I gave it 4 stars, and it's going to keep 3rd place at level 6. Then we have Warrior of Elements, and they get their worst feature at level 6, Elemental Burst, which I only gave 2 stars to. Still, I told you about the way I break ties, and because of that, this manages to hold on to 1st place despite the numerical tie with Mercy and Shadow. Then we have Warrior of Open Hand, and they get Wholeness of Body, and this is their worst feature. It was given 2 stars, and unfortunately for Warrior of the Open Hand, they're going to drop. It's going to drop to 5th place here at level 6. Then we get Way of the Ascended Dragon and Wings Unfurled. So this feature lets you fly, but not really. You can fly on your turn, and only if you use Step of the Wind, which most of the time you don't want to use with your bonus action. Then, at the end of your turn, you aren't flying anymore. If you're in the air, you're going to fall. This would be really bad, even without the limited uses that they slapped on, because I guess they don't want Dragon Monks just flying for a fraction of a round, using up their bonus action all the time. this is a 1-star trash feature. So Ascended Dragon only has 3 points at level 6. That's still enough for 7th place, and yeah, that's not a good sign. Now we have Way of the Astral Self, and they get Visage of the Astral Self. This is a bonus action, and it costs 1 focus point, and it gives you 120-foot dark vision that can see through magical darkness, advantage on Wisdom, Insight, and Charisma Intimidation checks, woo, and you can whisper or shout really loud for 10 minutes. Now, maybe if you are in a party that wants to work around magical darkness, this could be okay, but honestly, the Shadow Monk is right there. Like, why wouldn't you play that instead if that's what you want to focus on? Otherwise, this just is not good, and it's a 1-star feature. And also, we have 3 points total, so we'll put this right behind the Dragon Monk in 8th place. Now we have Way of the Drunken Master and Tipsy Sway, which is pretty bad. You can get up from prone faster, which is very minor, and then we get Redirect Attack, which allows you to redirect a melee attack that misses you as a reaction, uses a focus point, which is pretty bad too. And this is probably worse than it used to be, because we probably want to save our reaction in melee for deflect attacks for when we get hit, which can also redirect attacks, by the way, and saves us damage. And unlike this, doesn't require another target within 5 feet. You can just redirect it back at the attacker, which is a huge advantage because you often don't have another attacker within 5 feet. This is 1 star, I'm afraid, and that's another 3-point total subclass and 9th position. There is one that's even worse. You'll never guess what it is. Now we get to Way of Kensai and One with the Blade. Your attacks with Kensai weapons are treated as magical. Now, if you've seen the 2024 Monster Manual, you know that this is quickly becoming a completely obsolete feature. New monsters do not have resistance to non-magical attacks, so it does nothing for them. We also get Death Strike, and that allows you to do 1 extra martial arts die of damage on a hit on your turn for 1 focus point. And here is where I point out, there are multiple monk subclasses that allow you to add a martial arts die of damage once per turn, but this is the only one that is going to charge you a focus point every single time. Still, it's probably worth 2 stars, but a weak 2 stars. That's 5 total, and that is enough for 6th place. Then we have Way of the Long Death and Hour of Reaping, and this is a odd feature. You get a fear effect with a 30-foot range, and not up to 30 feet, it's 30 feet. That affects all targets within range, and you cannot exclude your allies. This is a very odd thing to do. It uses your action, and the fear lasts for a round. Now, I have seen this be good, and I've seen adventures go by where there is nowhere the monk can go to avoid affecting their allies with this. Now, I don't think I've seen a high-level Long Death monk in play, though what I would consider at high levels is maybe this could combine nicely with Hero's Feast for the party, so you don't have to worry about friendly fire because they'll all be immune to the frightened condition. Though, once we get to higher levels, frightened immunity is more common. I think this is decent, and it's probably worth 3 stars, and that is 6 total, and that's enough to jump to 4th spot at 6th level. And then, last and least, Way of the Sun Soul and Searing Arc Strike. You can spend 2 focus points to cast Burning Hands at 1st level as a bonus action after you take the attack action. So it costs twice as much as Flurry of Blows, and it will probably be less effective. This is a 1-star feature. I guess they just didn't want you to play Sun Soul Monks. There is an option to upcast the Burning Hands by spending even more focus points, which you should never ever do. This subclass is now at 2 lousy rating points at 6th level in a shameful 10th place. We get to level 11, and we have Warrior of Mercy. It got Flurry of Healing and Harm, and that is a definite disappointment at level 11 for Warrior of Mercy. This is a 2-star feature, and with 9 points, they're going to drop to 3rd place at level 11. Then we have Warrior of Shadow, and they get Improved Shadow Step, which is a so-so upgrade to Shadow Step, and it is also only worth 2 stars. That gives Warrior of Shadow a total of 9 points, and they're tied with Warrior of Mercy. They're going to be in 4th place at level 11. Then we get Warrior of Elements, and they're back on track with the strong Stride of Elements, which is a 4-star feature, and that's going to give them 11 points total and keeps them in first place at level 11. Then Warrior of Open Hand. This is a huge level for them because they get the amazing Fleet Step, which is a 5-star feature. That brings Open Hand Monk to 10 points, just one back of Warrior of Elements, and second place overall. This is a fair jump in the rankings for them. Then we get Way of the Ascendant Dragon, and they get Aspect of the Worm. They can use a bonus action once per long rest to get a bonus action Frighten feature that lasts 1 minute. Except if you watch this series, I've spoken about giving monks bonus action options a number of times and why that's not so great and maybe not even better than the action things they can do. Or they can use a bonus action to set up a damage resistance and a small aura where others can benefit from that damage resistance as well. There's a 3 focus point option to use this more than once. I don't see using it multiple times very often, but it's not a useless feature, but I do think it's on the weak side, so it's going to get 2 stars. That gives Way of the Ascendant Dragon 5 stars total and lands them in 7th place. Then we have Way of the Astral Self, and they're going to get Body of the Astral Self, which also got worse in the new rules. Half of the feature gives you the ability to reduce energy damage as a reaction. They call it Deflect Energy, not unlike the standard monk feature that reduces damage by far more than this feature does. This works on non-attacks though, while the Deflect Energy feature for base monks only works on attacks. So it's not completely worthless, but it is pretty bad. And then you get 1 martial arts die of extra damage once on your turn, so it's kind of like a high-level Elements monk, except you don't get the other stuff. Still, I think this is worth 2 stars. And that gives us 5 points total and lands Astral Self Monk in 8th place. Then Drunken Master and Drunkard's Luck. This is another weird feature for this subclass. You know how often you make ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws with disadvantage? Well, you can make one of them straight up for 2 focus points. I mean, disadvantage on attacks comes up, I guess, but do I really want to spend 2 focus points to cancel disadvantage on a single attack? That seems like a bad deal to me. If it was canceling disadvantage on a saving throw, maybe, but I don't have disadvantage on saving throws very often. I guess if I'm surprised, I could use 2 focus points to cancel the disadvantage to my initiative. That might be worth it. So I'm going to give this 2 stars, which is going to give them 5 points total, and they're going to be in 9th place at level 11. Then we get Way of the Kensai and Sharpen the Blade. So Sharpen the Blade lets you use your bonus action for a 1-minute weapon boost. So you know I'm going to have some issues with that right away. You spend some of your focus points and you get a bonus to hit and damage with your weapon. Unless it already has a bonus, then it doesn't work. And that is a bad limitation to put on an 11th level character. I can think of where this would be good though. Like if I was, say, a longbow Kensai monk, then my bonus action isn't as valuable. I mean, it's what, a D4 damage. So I can spare the bonus action, and if I happen to get a magic longbow that's like a vicious longbow, then this would be pretty good. Now, I am not used to DMs telling me to expect a vicious longbow by level 11 when I'm level 3 and choosing a subclass, but there are one-shots where I sometimes participate where I could see this coming up. And so I do think I'll give it 2 stars. That's 7 points. That brings it to 6th place. Then we get Way of the Long Death and Mastery of Death, which is another odd one for Way of the Long Death. When you are reduced to 0 hit points, you can expend 1 focus point and have 1 hit point instead. That's common. We see that. But the odd thing here is you can keep using this until you run out of focus points. So you are dropped to 0 hit points, you spend a focus point, you have 1 hit point. You're hit again, you drop to 0 hit points again, you spend another focus point, you drop to 1 hit point again, and so on until you run out of focus. That is a nice add-on, and I think that is enough to give this 3 stars. That gives them 9 points, and it's going to place them in 5th place at level 11. Then we get Way of the Sun Soul, and they get Searing Sunburst. This is probably their best feature. So they can throw what are essentially fireballs with their action, but they do 2d6 damage, a quarter of the damage of a fireball. Now, they can up the damage up to a d8, which would be equal to a fireball, but that is really expensive in terms of focus points. This is actually fairly comparable to the 6th level Warrior of Elements feature, and it is the best thing the Sun Soul Monk gets, unfortunately. I am going to give it 2 stars. That's 4 points. That gets them 10th place. And finally, level 17. So Warrior Mercy, we finish up with Hand of Ultimate Mercy, 2-star feature, and that's 11 points for a total final position of 4th place. And then we have Warrior of Shadow, which gets Cloak of Shadows, which is a largely redundant feature, but it does have some decent aspects. So it ended up being worth 2 stars, and that's also 11 points total for a final position of 5th place, though technically Mercy and Shadow are still tied, so they are tied all the way through. Warrior of Elements gets a pretty nice suite of features at 17th level called Elemental Epitome that combine for 4 stars and 15 points total. Warrior of Elements holds first place at level 17, but just barely, as you're about to see, because Warrior of Open Hand gets Quivering Palm, which is very nice with the new rules and represents a big damage upgrade for the subclass. I gave it 5 stars, and that brings Open Hand up to 15 points, which is the same number of points as Warrior of Elements. It's quite a journey for Open Hands that ends up in 2nd place, tied for points with Warrior of Elements, but behind because it was at lower point totals at earlier levels. Then we get Way of the Ascendant Dragon, and they get Ascendant Aspect. So Augment Breath provides a fairly obvious scaling to our Dragon Breath feature, but they charge you a focus point to use it. Still, it now has a pretty big area, and the damage isn't terrible for the cost of 1 attack. We also get Blind Sight for 10 feet, hardly unique or what you would expect from a 17th level feature, but as part of a 17th level feature, it's decent. And Explosive Fury, which is actually fairly difficult to use, and I don't think it's very good. Still, there is enough here that I think overall it's worth 3 stars because the first 2 parts of it are both okay. That is 8 points total for Way of the Ascended Dragon, and it ends up with a pretty low 8 points. Still enough for 8th place, though. And then we have Way of the Astral Self. They get Awakened Astral Self. So now you get your arms, visage, and body all at once for 5 focus points, which is more than double what it costs to get them all separately. But you get a +2 armor class and get an extra attack with your attack action. The cost is high, but the benefits here are substantial. So this is actually worth 4 stars. That's a total of 9 points for Way of the Astral Self, and it limps up to 7th position at level 17. It is a long trek to get to being still a below average subclass. And then Way of the Drunken Master, they get Intoxicated Frenzy. So it is a promise that is amazing, but the closer you look at how it interacts with the rules, the more you realize it's not very good. So the way it works is you use Flurry of Blows, and then you can make up to 3 additional attacks, meaning with the new rules, you could potentially make 6 attacks with just Flurry of Blows. Here is the kicker. All 6 attacks need to be against different targets. Even with your original 3 attacks from Flurry of Blows, you can't focus fire. If you want this to do anything, that is a big downside, but it gets worse. This you might not be aware of, but the rules allow for you to move between attacks of the attack action. I promise you, there is no rule in D&D that allows you to move between attacks of a bonus action. I promise you, you can look for it, but it's not there. Now, maybe your DM lets you move between attacks of a bonus action anyways, and that's fine. Play your table as you play your table, but I'm rating these based on the rules as they're written. And this would not be very good, even if it wasn't almost impossible to use. Maybe being impossible actually makes it better because you're more likely to avoid the trap that is this feature. Either way, this is 1 star, 6 points over 17 levels, and 9th position. The Storm Sorcerer, by the way, was the lowest ranked sorcerer. It had 11 stars total. Then we have Way of the Kensai. They get Unerring Accuracy. So when you miss with a monk weapon on your turn, you can reroll the attack roll. Here is the issue. This doesn't work with unarmed strikes, And thanks to our 3rd level feature, we're likely only making 1 weapon attack and then a bunch of unarmed strikes on our turn. So this isn't anywhere near the value of an extra attack or even a reroll with a missed attack. This is a 2-star feature for that reason, and I may be being generous. With 9 stars total, and thanks to a better start over the Astral Self Monk, somehow 9 points is enough for 6th place in the rankings. Old Monk subclasses, overall not so good. However, there is one exception, Way of the Long Death. So they're going to get Touch of the Long Death, which is actually not all that much different than the new version of Quivering Palm. If you spend 4 focus points, like you would with Quivering Palm, the damage would be worse with this, and it's going to cost you a full action instead of 1 attack to use. On the other hand, the damage ceiling is technically higher. I mean, you can spend up to 10 focus points at once here for potentially 20d10 necrotic damage, save for half. And yeah, it's a less reliable damage type. Yes, it's less efficient damage. Yes, it uses a little bit more of your action economy to use, so it's definitely worse than Quivering Palm, but I do think I can justify 3 stars here. And that is a respectable 12 points for Way of the Long Death, which manages to work its way onto the podium at 3rd place. Then we get Way of the Sun Soul. They're going to get Sun Shield. Wait for this. This might be the worst feature that I've covered in this entire video. So, first off, you shed light as if you were holding a lantern. Exactly the same. Wow. Also, if a creature hits you with a melee attack and you chose not to use deflect attacks or deflect energy for some reason, you can instead do terrible damage to them with your reaction. You should, of course, always deflect the damage instead. This is basically worthless. It almost doesn't deserve 1 star, but I didn't create a mechanism to give 0 stars. I did set that as my minimum, and so they're going to get 1 star. That gives them a measly 5 stars total. Absolutely shameful. Sun Soul is 10th place, and honestly, I'd be surprised if any subclass of any class ends up doing any worse or even this bad. So my final learnings here is that unlike the Sorcerer, the subclass spread for monks is dramatic. With Sorcerer, I was surprised how close they were. Here, they're not close at all. Those old monk subclasses just didn't get any love, or at least most of them didn't. Sun Soul was just as bad as I remembered once I dove into it, and their terrible 17th level feature is even worse with the updated monk. There's also a number of subclasses that got worse with the updated monk. The base monk is, however, much improved. So if you wanted to make a Sun Soul monk, it would still not be great, because Sun Soul's so bad. I'd really consider something else. However, unlike the Sorcerer, the top 4 were not all Player's Handbook subclasses this time. The Way of the Long Death monk snuck in there at 3rd place. So if you want to use one of the older subclasses, that's one I might take a look at. So my multiclassing video will come next for monks, and I'll go over all what I consider to be the optimal options for multiclassing your monk, and then I will start a new series, and I have figured out what class I'm going to be doing. Before I reveal that though, I want to thank you for watching. This video would not be possible without the patrons of this channel, and I'd like to quickly thank my mage level supporters. If you would be willing to support this channel, please click the link in the video description for my Patreon. Thanks to Mr. Wonderful, Babrak, DMG, John D, Darren Williams, Descarpus9, El Conquistadorito, Avengi R, Phoenix, Hatap, Jared Huberger, John Wayne, Joseph Robideau, Wu Carl Kong, McSkill, Michael Michelle, Moxie, Nemo, Paul Suzak, Phantasmagoria Prime or Phantasmagoria Prime. Let me know which one it is. Phil Sokolov, Prometheo NTG, Big Chungus, Robert Riley, Shane and Todd Beyond, Simon Jester, Somnareel, Earshine, The Fantastic Emporium, Tyler Thorstrom, Blue Wolf, Zukarob, and Wade. And after my monk multiclassing video, by overwhelming demand, I'll be covering Warlocks next. And I will likely start, before I start rating subclasses, I'll do a video on Invocations. And I hope you will join me for that series. Otherwise, until next time, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.